Sure. So I'm Tiffany Olson, and I've spent my entire career in healthcare, so mostly in pharmaceutical and diagnostic companies. Currently, I'm the president of Nuclear and Precision Health Solutions at Cardinal Health. And at NPHS, what we do is we develop, we manufacture, we dispense, and we deliver radioactive drugs. And these drugs are used for either diagnostics, which is tell me what's wrong, or therapeutics, help fix what's wrong in nuclear medicine. So that's what I am doing today.
Well, thank you. Well, we have your slides pulled up. So just say next slide or on the next slide, and the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you. So we'll stay on this first intro slide here just for a moment, Ginger. So first of all, thank you for having me today, and it was great to listen to the panel speakers too. Really learned a lot. So since I was just a little girl, I knew that I always wanted to lead a business. So my friends would come over to play Barbie. I wanted to play store, and I wanted to be the store owner. So I've always kept that goal, and even now, I still look at how to continually develop and continue to grow that goal by studying leadership. And so today, we're going to talk about being an inspirational leader and a female leader in uncertain times, because that is exactly what we're dealing with today. So I want folks just to take a moment and remember back 11 years ago. Remember back to 2010. So do you remember what was going on in your life? Kind of what was going on in the world and all the things that have happened since. So if we were together, I would ask those to raise your hand if you think that change has accelerated over the last few years. But I am sure that the majority of you would raise your hands. So Ginger, if you could go to the next slide, which kind of goes to my hypothesis that change isn't coming, it's here and it's accelerating. I think we all experienced with COVID just all these rapid changes in our society and in the workplace. And frankly, they're overwhelming. And companies specifically need inspirational leaders. So those are people that can make sense out of the chaos. So before we get into some of the specifics of leadership and style, I want to look at the outward trends, because these make a very large difference to what companies do. And these particular three trends that you see here impact almost every industry. So the first one, consumerism. So think back to how you consumed goods and services before the pandemic. And now how we do it. Well, we're online. We expect delivery to our home or even to the car. And there is very little personal touch to any of these. It's really anonymous. And because of this, it causes consumers to really turn to a trusted brand. So people are much less likely to go with companies that they don't know. So what this means is that brand reputation for companies is bigger than it has ever been before. Next one is women in the workplace. So nearly 3 million women have left the workforce in this past year. And we really call it this coronavirus-induced exodus. And why? Well, we all experienced it. Daycares closed, schools went remote, and many of us just overnight became teachers, coaches, technical experts. And it really reflects kind of this added burden that a lot of women feel who are either caregivers or taking care of extended families. And there's a group, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, it's called the Lean In Org, and they did a survey. And the survey showed that 1 in 4 women are now considering leaving the workforce or even downshifting their careers. So before the pandemic hit, women consisted of about 50% of the U.S. workforce. And as you can imagine, that has incredible economic impact to our GDP. But because of this exodus, it's going to take us years to return to that percent. And so this is a trend that's really important for leaders to understand. And we're going to talk about the fight for talent, which I know in one of the panels also got discussed. Kind of the last major big trend is this technology innovation. So McKinsey does a lot of surveys, and it's very easy to get on their website and register for all of the great work that they do. But they did a recent survey, 900 executives, and they said, what has COVID done to accelerate innovations in technology? Kind of this digitization of work. And what they said was that the work processes internally accelerated by 3 to 4 years. So COVID caused this acceleration, and their product innovation by over 7 years. So just think about it, a 7-year acceleration of digital products. And they also said that about 80% of their customer interactions are going to be digital in nature. So what do leaders need to do to prepare for this? I mean, how do we lead through these incredible changes and trends that are happening so quickly? So if you want to go to the next slide. So I'm going to take a moment and just talk about these three in a little more detail. So when you talk about consumerism, there's actually also been a decline in discretionary spending. So despite this huge surge in e-commerce, people are spending less money, partially due to loss of income, changes of a lifestyle. And in this McKinsey study, they actually say that this personal disposable income is not expected to recover until mid-2024. That's going to have an incredible impact to businesses. Second one is this adoption of digital use and its accelerated trends, especially in entertainment. So I think what's incredible is Disney Plus. In just 2 months, they achieved the same level of success that Netflix took 7 years to accomplish. So huge implications for companies. So what does that mean? That means that if you're a company, you really have to look at the speed of which a new competitor can enter your market. So very interesting kind of changes. And of course, telemedicine, which is where, I've been in healthcare my entire career, tremendous changes. So in 15 days, there was a 10 times increase in telemedicine visits. So the supply chain cannot keep up with that, and we experienced that in a lot of the outages of, let's name it, from toilet paper to hamburger meat, chicken, Clorox. The supply chain was not able to keep up with this huge shift in demand. And we're just still kind of getting out of some of that. And then remote learning. So remote learning, widely accepted, but I would say for those of us with children or that we do training that really requires hands-on learning, remote learning was widely accepted, but probably not widely appreciated most of the time. So how do all of these trends impact our teams? How can we help them through these? And one thing that's very important is to remain flexible. So flexible leadership in your style and how you communicate with people, from how we learn and really understanding these impacts, not only to our business and the markets we're in, but how it's impacting our employees. If you want to go to the next slide. So the next one, and I know that, thank you. I know that this was talked about earlier, just the changes in the workforce. So, from research, but also my own experience, everyone has dealt with COVID differently. And women have been particularly impacted. But I think that there's going to be this new workforce, these new ways of working in the future, and companies are still trying to figure this out and looking for leaders to help them. So one is in flexibility. So it's flexibility in locations and in hours. And, these stressors aren't necessarily limited to women or parents, but what we've seen is this massive increase in caregiving responsibilities at home. And what that means is that it jeopardizes some people's ability to stay in the workforce. So a recent survey, 40% of mothers, and this was compared to 27% of fathers, have added more than 3 hours a day of caregiving. So that's over 15 hours a week. And as we all know, that's not really sustainable in the old model that we had. So this flexibility is going to be important. And, as things open up, like care, daycares, things like that, will some of those hours be reduced? Possibly. But again, it's going to be in this flexibility that's needed. And for the leader, this flexibility has challenges for the leader. Like, how do you make sure you're meeting customer expectations if you don't have everybody together? Your culture in your company. There are actually tax implications for where you have employees, office space, kind of other things. And people are also used to less hands-on management. So during COVID, everybody had to figure out how to get their work done without kind of that day-to-day interaction that a lot of us were having, that physical interaction. And a lot of people are going to kind of expect the same type of managerial style when they return. So again, it gets back to this flexibility and adaptability. The other thing that we are going to see is reduced work travel. McKinsey has said that 20% of their business travel will never return. And that's because we have all learned new, very acceptable ways to conduct business. So how we sell, how the sales force sells. A lot of Zoom, emails, text, things like this versus face-to-face. We need face-to-face, but there's also other ways that I think through this pandemic, they will still continue on. And of course, the other thing is just with all the cleaning protocols, and I believe what it's going to mean when people return back to offices or return back to, let's say, a large office building, but there might be maybe less shared amenities. Will the, kind of grab-and-go places still be open, those types of things? So I think for the reality of the leader, it's going to be this war on talent. Everybody's experiencing it. Every industry, restaurants, airlines, drivers, any industry. And we're going to have to lead our teams and our companies through this. And it becomes really important for leaders to kind of understand some of these things and what will be important for their company. So next slide, Ginger. So the final macro trend that I wanted to discuss is really about this technology and it's impacting all of us. So this photo that you see on this slide is one that I want to talk to a little bit. So this is a photo from the movie Hidden Figures. And hopefully many of you saw this incredible movie because what it is about brilliant women. And I like to say, we've got a lot of brilliant women on this phone here with us today, too. But in the movie, NASA is really struggling with this very first IBM computer. And there were 3 very smart female mathematicians that cracked this code. And they do it by changing their skills. And I know one of the other panelists talked about how her job was going to be, quote, eliminated. And she really changed her skills and how she thought of things to be able to adapt to kind of the new environment and make herself very, necessary for the organization. And that's what this movie is about. Taking something that's disruptive, like new technology, and being the first to kind of crack that code. And I also like this because it shows that it is not the first time in our history that we've seen these significant interruptions due to technology changes. And artificial intelligence is also truly growing. And it's grown by over 270% in just the last 4 years alone. So all of these types of changes are just, rapidly accelerating. The touchless interaction. We have robots serving our food. If you go into any McDonald's now, you pick from a electronic menu. There's a lot of robotics involved in what they do. And the other thing is in this rise of the Internet of Things, the IoT. And the Internet of Things, you're going to hear this a lot. But what it means is it's just a network of physical objects that are embedded with a software and a sensor and technology that is existing to connect these devices and exchange data. So for instance, if you have a refrigerator that will tell you if you're out of milk, if you have smart medicine containers, if you have a helmet a bike helmet that if you get into an accident, it will call someone or alert someone. Those are all about this rise of the Internet of Things. And it's estimated, another trend, that this is going to increase from 60 billion devices to 75 billion devices by 2025. So an incredible change in industries. And of course, the biotechnology race. So the pandemic really taught us with urgency on tackling these global health issues. And groups that had never come together were coming together to help to solve these big problems. So what does this all mean for leaders? You know, how do we understand all of these changes, how they're going to impact the team, impact the market? You know, can you successfully connect these dots and inspire change that's needed in companies? Next slide. Because what happens in organizations is all of these trends are coming at companies very, very quickly. And what do companies do? They have to change. They have to go through these business transformations to survive. And companies are accelerating these types of changes because they're trying to figure out what is it that we need to do to survive. And this is where leadership is all about, because it's about calming the chaos and the confusion. Because in response to these trends, what we're seeing are businesses changing their operating model. How do they become more agile? How do they reduce costs? How do they shift the cost basis? How do they use technology in new ways? Do they expand into new markets like the Disney Plus model and at a very, very fast, accelerated pace? How do they leverage technology for, let's say, customer insights or working from home options? And we've seen, as we all know, jobs eliminated due to some of this new technology. And then, of course, the talent. And how, as leaders, do you attract? How do you find talent? How do you attract them? And then how do you retain them? How do you keep them? So everyone's trying to find this stability through this chaos. And it's the leaders that are capable of connecting these dots that are the leaders that are so important. So how do you do that? Next slide. And just one click on this next slide, if you could. Okay, that's fine. Just let's stay in here. So first, you need to understand the difference between being a leader and a manager. So this quote right under here is from John Cotter, and it really comes to mind about managing versus leading. And the quote is, good management brings a degree of order and consistency to key directions like quality and profitability. But leadership is about coping with change. Coping with change. That's what leadership is about. So managers follow the direction, analyze data. Leaders inspire the change. You've got to grab not just the mind, but the heart. You have to sell that vision. So to better demonstrate, I'm going to do two examples. So example one. So Jane leads a team of physicians, and this particular practice is getting acquired. So she implements this step-by-step project plan, makes sure absolutely everybody understands how they do their jobs and what is changing as a result of this acquisition, and all of the reports that need to occur. So is she managing or leading? Well, she's managing, because her physicians know how their jobs are going to change. They know the path to march on, but they don't understand why and what the vision of the future is. Because once they're marching on the path, where are they going? You know, what's their new purpose? What What will their life be like? And what will their patients, their customers' life be like? So managers are executors. They oversee work, they achieve goals, and they analyze results. So let me give another example. So this is Sue. So Sue is a specialist. She's a subject matter expert at a company. And she's not in charge of the department, but she sees this opportunity to restructure for better efficiency, better customer experience. So she builds a business case, she has a vision, she presents it to the head of the department. Is Sue leading or managing? What is her behavior? Well, she's leading because leaders are visionaries. They demonstrate behaviors like inspiring change or envisioning the possibilities, selling their vision, gaining alignment. Now, both sets of these skills are essential. And the strongest leaders are those who not only have both, but they can toggle between these. They can adapt and leverage based on the situation. So they're just as proficient in galvanizing the workforce as they are in executing on their vision and overseeing that work. And these are the kind of leaders that we have to have in uncertain times. So what does it take? You know, when I think about my career, there are really several key skills that I have continued to try to develop and to make sure that I'm that type of leader who can inspire and mobilize folks. The next slide, Ginger. Great. So my leadership philosophy, I can sum it up in 3 words. It's listen, learn, and lead. So first, you have to be an active listener. So this is listening to employees at every level in your organization. It's listening to your peers and to industry experts. Most importantly, it's being able to hear what's being said in the quiet and to make sure that you know what's going on in the organization and where the choke points are. But sometimes people can articulate them, and sometimes people can't. The next one I call learn to get dusty. So this is more than just walking in someone's shoes. It's walking behind them in their dust and learning from them. You know, being willing to kind of really get yourself dirty, learn from others, and what the organization and employees are trying to tell you. And then have a vision. So you take what you've heard, you take what you've learned, you take the data points, all of this market information, these macro trends, and figure out what the future holds. Why is it going to be better in this organization? What does it mean for the employees? What does it mean for the customers? And then the last one is you got to lead out loud. You have to calm the chaos. Because if you don't tell people about where the business is going, they're not going to know. And they're going to fill that void with other stories. And many times they fill it with negative things. And there is a rule of 7. I'm sure all the marketing folks out there know that. And this is through marketing analysis that people need to hear a message at least 7 times before taking action. So be prepared, tell your vision over and over and over again. And do it out loud. Different groups in different ways, writing, videos, blogs, live, etc. So last slide, next slide. So successful leaders of the future, they know how to understand these global trends, this consumerism, workforce changes, technologies, and there are other ones. I just picked those 3. But they pick then the right business transformation. So based on that, what are these transformations in your business that need to happen and occur to keep the company successful and viable? And then accelerate the acceptance of these changes. And that's by knowing the difference between are you managing and leading. When do you need to do one or the other? You should always be leading, but there's a lot of times you have to be managing. Because you can always find managers but there are just that very special few who truly know how to lead. So my philosophy, listen, learn, and lead, often and out loud. So leaders don't always have all the answers. We never do. But it's about incorporating ideas, information from other teams that will always create the best solutions and the best outcomes. So I wish you all success as really you lead from where you are in your organization. I can already tell this group on the phone, powerful women who can make amazing changes in your organization. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. All right, we've got a lot of questions that have come in on the chat, so I'm trying to read through them because some of them came in early in your presentation. I'm going to start with this first one because it's short. And this one came from Hannah. And Hannah says, do you have any ideas on how a good leader can build their team remotely?
Yes. So this is something that I think, and this is part of the new world that we all have, and that's how do you do teamwork remotely? It's difficult. As the leader, you have to be uber prepared. And it's going to take you more time to prepare a meeting that involves team building remotely than it does if you are actually in an office. So I'll give you an idea of something that I did. So we had I do offsite strategies with a group of my leaders. And we had planned an offsite strategy for March 16th, 2020. And that was a Monday, the Friday before everything went remotely. And we had planned 35 people live. We were going to do this incredible viewing of artwork to really kind of get the strategic mind going and that great synergies between art and science. A lot of studies done there. Well, that all went out the window. So about 3 weeks later, because it took us 3 weeks to get organized, we did a virtual offsite. And we had homework ahead of time. We asked, and I know a lot of people do this now, but everybody picked a background, and then we went around, everybody had to talk about the background and why they chose that. And that took some extra time. We did a lot of then the big team groups and then merged into the smaller, then came back into the larger groups, and then, did the little smaller groups where everybody then had an opportunity. As the leader in remote, it's really important to call on everybody, to get everybody to turn their cameras on, to pick out people on the screen, to make sure everyone is 100% engaged. We've also I also did some other kind of team building things where everyone sent in ahead of time some answers to some personal questions. So one of them was, what is the funniest thing you did in high school? And then we would read what that was, and people had to guess who it was. That creates this real kind of fun team building. We also did some trivia contests. So that team building takes a lot of pre-time for the leader. Would be kind of my advice on doing those things. The other thing that I will say is culture remotely can be very difficult to keep up. Culture is something that takes years to build and a moment to destroy in an organization. And for me, keeping my culture up in my organization, it's storytelling. And every time I get an opportunity, I tell stories from the field, stories of individuals, not ones that I have, it's not like, hey, when I went blah, blah, blah. It's, let me tell you about the story of, heroics and telling that story, because that's the culture that we have. We call it one team. So any of those stories also kind of help build the team.
Oh, that's great advice. Thank you. So for our next question, This question comes from Nancy, and Nancy says, it seems that our team has been experiencing pandemic fatigue and burnout because our industry has gotten more business than ever before. How do you help these employees recover from burnout and feeling underappreciated and taken advantage of because they have more on their plate than ever before?
Yes. So I guess my question would be, what is the relief for them? Because if people are truly overextended, then something has to change. Either more people, technology, because people can't sustain that level. People can't sprint a marathon. So I think that from that fatigue, I think those are just some things as a leader to think about. I think, though, recognition goes a long way. Sending if somebody does something special, sending them a gift card, sending them flowers, sending them some food. When I have I have a monthly staff meeting, I always do Uber lunches for everybody because we're in the meeting all day. So it's just a little something. And I think that kind of recognition that kind of something special for someone, whether it's a handwritten note that you send or an email note, I think those go a long way. I think giving people the opportunity to be fully unplugged from their system and that it's kind of expected. So I am if you haven't figured it out, I am very type A. I work all kinds of weird hours. I travel over all kinds of different time zones. But I tell my folks that if I send an email late at night, I don't expect you to return it. I expect you to return it during normal business. If I really need you, I will call or text you if it's an emergency. So I think that setting some of those parameters for the team and letting people know that that is fine to set those parameters helps people to say, all right, I don't have to check my computer at 9 p.m. at night. I can step away. I can leave it at 5, and then I'm going to be done. And nobody's going to judge me because of that. So I think those kind of parameters help. But I think if there is a heck of a lot more business that's come, then that's one of those business transformations. Then what is the appropriate headcount resourcing level or technology that needs to happen? And sometimes they don't always happen right away, so you've got this fatigue. But if people know that there's something coming to help them, I think that goes a long way.
Oh, very well said. Thank you. So let's see. Next question came from Dorothy. And Dorothy asks, how do you know where to draw the line when it comes to being empathetic versus being a pushover?
So for me, it's about what was the expectation and the result that was expected. And you can be very empathetic, but people have to take accountability. Now, sometimes a goal is set too high. We've all experienced that. Things change. People can't meet the goal. So I think being empathetic is really important. But if a goal is set and if there's nothing wrong with course correcting that goal, but I think that the difference is that the team has to feel that things are fair. And being empathetic is great, but you have to keep people accountable as a leader also. I don't know if I quite answered that, but I would say that as women, I think that we've got great capacity to be empathetic, and I think it's fine to be empathetic, but as a leader, you've got goals. And as long as people know what the goals are and you're checking in and how things are going, course correct if you need to, but at the end of the day, people have to be accountable.
All right, well, I'm going to let this be our last question, and then we will ask you for some final thoughts as we wrap for the day. So this question comes from Jenna, and Jenna asks, I want to excel to the next level of leadership. and I want to be there for my kids after school, especially during teenage years. Is it possible to be in a leadership role and manage unconventional hours? I feel like I'm pressured to wait till the kids are grown before moving to the next level.
Well, so I think that is something that a lot of women struggle with, and I would say I've struggled with that throughout my whole career. My first CEO role was in 2004, and my children were very young. They were still in grade school. I moved overseas when my children were very young. But a couple of things. One, I've always had a very, very strong support network, whether that be my husband, my extended family, girlfriends, who I could, lean on a lot. I think that this is a very personal decision, and it's one that depends on what type of job it is and what kind of support system you have. And there will be things that are right for you at different times in your career. But I would say if you don't go for it, you're never going to really know, because I don't think any of us are ever really ready for kind of the next big change. But when it comes, or you have an opportunity for it, you go for it. And if it's not right, you're going to find out. And what is the worst thing that can happen? You step back. And that's not a bad thing. So my advice would be go for it. Make sure you've got a strong support system, because for me, I could always take stress at work. I could take stress at home. I could take drama in my extended family, but I couldn't have all three of those on the same week. And so it's how do you maneuver through all of that? I had I had great childcare and although I ended up switching some places throughout the way, and that was the most stressful situation in my life, was when I wasn't sure what my kind of the next childcare setting was going to be. But all of those things just, I think when you're in them, you just work through them. So I would say go for the next level, but still be there for your kids. And being there for your kids is going to look different for everyone, and it's going to look different for what you want to do at different times in your career. And there isn't a formula that's the same for everybody.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up for the afternoon. So before we end for the day, do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners today?
So my final words of wisdom are go for it in your career. Become a student of leadership, because managing is something that I think a lot of people can do, but leading is totally different. So become a student of leadership, of how you can improve your own leadership skills, how you can make sure that you're leading out loud, and it doesn't matter where you are in your organization to be able to do this. And I just wish everybody the best of luck in their careers.
Well, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our speakers today, both our panel members and our keynote speakers. And thank you to all our listeners as well. Without all of you, these events would not be possible. So let's continue to support women's leadership and learn from one another. So be safe, be kind to yourselves, and be well. So until next time, this is Ginger Watley signing off. Have a great evening, everyone.